Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Tuesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. The Lakers are 10 games deep into the season. What exactly do we know about them? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. This one's always free and never behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 26,000 subscribers to the channel, Andy, all of whom are wondering two things. Is this team any good? And can Anthony Davis see? So we will cover both of those things over the course of this episode. Do want to let you know first that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We'll get to the 6-4 Lakers, who are bunched in there tightly with a very, very impressive Western Conference where the 12th best team is one game under 500. We can contrast that to the East in a moment if everybody wants. But let's start, Andy, first with the Anthony Davis update, which is not much.
I don't know how to read into that, if people should read into that. For what it's worth, the Lakers did not practice on Monday, the day we're recording. So that is typically where updates would be given. They are scheduled to practice on Tuesday, so presumably more information will be given out then. I guess the theoretical, glass half full version of AD missing a game or even a couple games would be, assuming there's no long-term damage to be worried about, the Grizzlies banged up without Ja Morant, the Spurs, who you cannot take lightly just because of Wemby alone, but they're not off to the start that they had hoped for upon bringing in Chris Paul, Harrison Barnes, and the like. And then Saturday they play these zombie Pelicans, who are down to Brandon Ingram and I don't even want to say who else because I could be jinxing those otherwise healthy people.
Zelicans. Now,
if the Lakers do have to play without AD for a game or two, this is as good a time as anything, as any time that isn't ideal.
Flip side,
still rather have them.
Flip side, of course, is these are games that you have to win. So while they certainly remain winnable if AD doesn't play, in some ways, you could make an argument that if he's going to miss games, you'd almost rather they be like road games against Oklahoma City or something like that, where you could lose anyway. We've had this conversation before. I always want to make sure, sort of double down on the games that you really have to win, rather than those that you can play well and lose. But either way, we have not heard anything yet. The last time he had this problem with the corneal abrasions, getting poked in the eye. But, hopefully at the very least, it's not a long-term thing. We'll have more updates for everyone on Wednesday. Another thing to note, as long as we're talking about non-updates, no updates on Jared Vanderbilt or Christian Wood. So those guys are still out for a little while. I presume. That
I find more concerning than not having heard anything about AD's eye, because this was actually around the time where we were slated to get information on Christian Wood. So even if you had not expected anything definitive about Vando, although make no mistake, it is a little worrisome that we have not heard anything definitive about Vando. This is when we were actually supposed to
take, early November, mid-November.
Yeah.
We're getting at the very least, if not, I forget exactly when how many, I think they said they reevaluate or something in 6 weeks or whatever it is. But we are getting towards that place, and there has been zero news around Christian Wood, and again, nothing really about Vanderbilt. And so we're starting to get into that place where certainly for Vando, given the nature of his injuries and how difficult it's been for him to come back, it is a 2 to 3 week ramp up at least, I think, from like, all right, things are looking better to he's got to practice to he's going to go through a couple things. We got to see him recover and all the. So like it's when they say he's back on the floor and doing stuff, you're still looking at a couple weeks before he's out there. And then we're looking at December, really at this point, I think realistically before you can see, Thanksgiving, last week of November, early December, before you can see Vanderbilt on the floor. And I would say probably something similar for Wood. I mean, that's an uneducated guess, but just one based on the guy hasn't practiced or played or done anything and had a recurrence of the injury that put him on the shelf to begin with. Obviously, you're going to be careful with that. I think it's fair to say, Andy, that the team they have now is the team they're going to have, assuming the guys they have now stay healthy. The cavalry is not on its way.
Which allows us to, I guess, really take a meaningful look at the 10 games that we've seen, because we don't expect anything to radically change over, say, the next 10 or so that the Lakers play.
Which it makes sense because they haven't radically changed for the last 12 months. So I mean, this is what's interesting to me because it's rare to get this sort of like science, what do they call it? Like an A/B comparison or whatever, A/B test, where you can have like basically two things that are the same and you just change like one or whatever, and it's the coach and the coaching staff. The roster is essentially the same, although I would argue slightly worse because I think Taurean Prince at the very least is a more reliable and versatile NBA presence at this point than Dalton Knecht is, certainly defensively. And you get a little bit more out of him at this point. So you look at where the Lakers are, 6-4, right there, smack in with all the other teams. They are currently 7th in the conference, but have played one less game than some of the other teams. You're looking at it. OKC is 9-2. Phoenix is 8-2. Golden State's 8-2. That's a bit of a surprise. Denver seems to have straightened things out. They've won 5 in a row. They're 7-3. Houston and Memphis both 7-4. Lakers, Minnesota 6-4. Clippers 6-5. Sacramento 6-5. You got to get to the 11 seed Dallas before you get to a team that is even 500. And then San Antonio, you mentioned, while maybe, I'm not sure I agree with you that they're not off to a decent start, but they're 5-6.
I said they're not off to the start that I think they had potentially hoped for, bringing in Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes.
I think this is close. I think they are, relatively speaking, at about where you would want them, think they could be, which is somewhere near 500 over the course of the year, a couple games over. So, and you would expect them to get better over the course of the year. So like the Western Conference is a brutal place. The Lakers are right there. And if you look at it, the games that they've lost 4. And one of them came to Phoenix in a relatively tight game. The Suns are playing very well. One of them was to Memphis on a night where, Rui and AD were both out, which is certainly understandable. You would have liked him to play a better game, but you would like them to have, if nothing else, play harder as a group. Like that it was a really bad game, but the result is not necessarily surprising. They got blown off the floor by Cleveland. Cleveland is 12-0. They're doing that to everybody. And the one, come on guys, loss is really the Detroit game. And so evaluating where they are, if you'd told me before the season, we spent a lot of time before the season started talking about whether or not, what start you needed. They're 6-4. I'll ask you after the break, like if I had offered you 6-4, 10 games in, would you have taken that? That is the question for you, Andy, next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by Mint Mobile. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and the first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. But with Mint Mobile, you never have to worry about the gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. Like no hidden fees, upcharges, tricks buried in a complicated bill. You can say bye-bye to the overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, overexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting again at $15 a month. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. Again, ditch the overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal. Get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. $45 upfront payment required. It's equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on the first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
Okay, so quick reminder to everybody, lockedondaily.com is where you go to sign up for the newsletter. You have Locked On Lakers delivered to your inbox every single day. It's a great way to keep up with the podcast and also get other information from our writers and other hosts around the league. Again, lockedondaily.com. Subscribe to our newsletter first, but then, subscribe to as many as you want. Go for it. I asked before the break, Andy, whether or not if I had said 6-4 with a very realistic, you laid out the games, the 3 upcoming games they've got, with a very realistic opportunity to bump that to 9-4 by the time, the end of the week rolls around. If I had told you that was on the table, would you have taken that?
I would have taken it. I don't know if I would have been over the moon, but I definitely would not have been unhappy or at the very least angry at the prospect of 6-4, given that the Lakers had a reasonably tough, opening 4 or 5 games to start their slate, and the West is just difficult. Plus, contextually, there are we can get into some of what we've seen over 10 games. There's a lot that we've seen that I think you can look at that are positives as far as you projecting the next 72 games of the season, namely Anthony Davis, who has just been incredible to open this season. He is currently averaging, as of this recording, about 31 points, 10 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks, 57% from the field, 35% from behind the arc, 79% at the line, 18 field goal attempts a game, highest since the 2018 season, where he was 3rd in MVP voting, also 3rd in Defensive Player of the Year voting, 11 free throws per game, career high by a really wide margin. He's never hit 9 up until this point. The team, by the way, averages 27 per game as one of the leading free throw teams in the league. Almost 41% of those free throws are Anthony Davis. He leads the team in usage by about 7 points per game, 7 points in usage. He is doing exactly what you would want from a franchise player and then some. And there's a lot about this that, obvious injury caveats notwithstanding, you always have to be concerned about that with any player, much less somebody like AD, where that concern is always lingering. There's a lot about this that I feel is sustainable because it's very clearly the way this team is going to operate. There's been an edict from JJ Redick. We are going to feature Anthony Davis, and everybody seems to be on the same page about that. But also, this just feels like the direction AD was heading from last season. Yeah. Given how well he played last year, we talked about it being one of the best seasons of his career and probably the best season of his time as a Laker. He had a really good Olympics. We are concerned about the plantar fasciitis issue and how well he can manage all that stuff, and we'll see how it plays out. But again,
he needs goggles.
He needs goggles.
I just have regular glasses, and look, you can't poke me in the eye, Andy.
No,
can't be done.
He's just been really, really good, and again, everything you would want from a franchise player.
And I think you look and LeBron, after what as it turns out is sort of a typically slowish by LeBron standards. His Octobers, relatively speaking, are often a little weaker than November when it rolls around. But the consecutive triple doubles indicate that he has still got it when he needs it. And I don't expect really anything that much different than what we saw last year, which is really good. And you see Austin Reaves, especially post the last 2 games since they made the lineup change, has really responded well and elevated his level of play to that clearly third best player on the team, hopefully night in, night out kind of status, filling up a box score, doing all the kinds of stuff that you would want. And so, like, there are some positives there, certainly. But it's funny, like, when you look at the team, and again, maybe it shouldn't be that surprising, but a lot of what concerns people is the same stuff as before. It's a massive split between offense and defense, and they're a top 5 offense right now and a bottom 5 defense, and that's going to remind people of last year. And they are struggling mightily in transition. They're the worst transition defense team in the NBA. It's really not even close. And so, like, things like that will remind people. Even Andy, the rebounding, and we were talking about this earlier in the day as we were thinking of different things to get into today. Like, the rebounding project hasn't really worked, I think, the way they were hoping.
No, I don't know. We've heard about the limbo rate. Both Darvin Ham and JJ Redick have described this relatively new NBA stat, which is basically just the idea of how often your team is caught in limbo, whether crashing for the offensive glass or getting back in transition. And I cannot track down this actual stat. I looked.
I think it's an internal thing.
Well,
it's I don't think, like, you can go to NBA.com and they track limbo.
Well,
I think
I'm just going to go out on a limb.
Stat.
I'm just going to go out on a limb and project that however this thing is calculated, the Lakers are not doing well with it because they are currently 21st in the NBA for offensive rebounding percentage. In other words, the amount of potential offensive rebounds out there that they do grab. They are 24th in the league for second chance points. So this is not creating many second chance possessions, much less fruitful ones. You mentioned the defense. Their opponent field goal percentage is 27th in the league, 48%. That's not very good. They are allowing a lot of points in the restricted area, which I think has a lot to do with teams running on them. They
not
are
very restricted the way they're doing it.
No, they are 19th in the league for opponents' points off turnovers, 29th for opponent fast break points, third highest frequency of teams just getting out and running against them, because why wouldn't you? Like, what's really helping the Lakers in this regard is, unlike last year, and this is something different, they are taking much better care of the ball.
Yep.
They're only 4th in the league for turnovers. Like, they're doing very well there, because frankly, if they weren't, they'd probably be 4-6 or maybe even 3-7 if they weren't at least limiting the opportunities that, relatively speaking, that teams get to run on them, although not nearly enough.
Yeah, nothing in there that I disagree with. And it's just hard. Like, you want to try to, like, the idea that the Lakers could use second chances and offensive rebounding to try and mitigate some of their problems. And if you are an aggressive team on the glass, and you're good at it, other teams have to, they have to wait an extra second before they run out. They are a little bit more conservative with how quickly they try to just leak out all these other things. Like, the Lakers need still to generate more shots. One way you do that is by getting offensive rebounds and giving yourself second opportunities. I mean, literally, the Lakers last year chronically, it wasn't just that they took fewer 3-pointers than every team in the league, basically. It's that they took fewer shots than their opponent on most nights. That needed to change. So, like, in theory, all of these things make perfect sense, and they're reasonable things to try. The problem becomes, well, why were they bad at those things? And I think what we're all sorting through and will continue to is, what things were they not good at because the coaching didn't maximize or didn't come with a game plan that made a lot of sense? And then what weren't they good at because the players that they have aren't good at the things that you want them to do? Rui Hachimura is not a good rebounder for his size. He never has been. It would be phenomenal if he became one. It would be super helpful for the team if he became one. But as yet, he has not been a consistent rebounder in his career. So you go from last year to this year, part of what you're hoping to do is turn Rui Hachimura into a good rebounder. Part of this rebounding plan, I think, was predicated on Max Christie, who has not been able to stay on the floor because he hadn't been very good. And so, we are seeing some of the limitations as to maybe some of the bigger dreams. That said, I do think they are running a better offense. I think they are, more efficient in some of those ways. They have solved the Anthony Davis doesn't touch the ball enough problem, which was a huge issue last year. So there are a lot of things to like, but what I'm really curious about, and we'll get to this after the break, and then talk about some of the rumors that are flying around on how they might improve this team, is how you judge this year versus last year. Because if they continue to struggle, that faction of Darvin's supporters out there, small as they may be, we're going to start hearing from them on all the social media channels and whatever.
We do already.
Yeah, that's true. There just aren't that many of them, but it's an interesting comparison from last year to this year, and where you find some of that differentiation. So we'll get into it next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. Tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 back in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. And that's really useful if you feel like you're one of those people that can just anticipate the way a game's going to turn. If one team's going to get hot in the second half, one team, it feels like they're building momentum, the quarterback's starting to really get a feel for the game, whatever. You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you would place your bets. So all that information becomes streamlined. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just $5. It's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
So in your mind, where do you see the difference between last year and this year? I think certainly for me, it's in part just a lot of it is the way the team talks about stuff, I think there are obviously differences in the offense and how the offense operates, the types of plays that they run. The decision last year to this year, for example, for moving DAngelo Russell to the bench, I think is predicated in part because D'Lo wasn't shooting the ball well, although that was an issue, and more because what Redick wants to do offensively just doesn't lend itself to the two of them being on the floor at the same time, even with all the defensive issues that we have obviously seen there. So I think they are an improved offense and will continue actually to get better, because I think the shooting will get better as the season goes along. And it
actually is getting better. I mean, believe it or not, they're middle of the pack for 3-point shooting.
I believe it. And I think their volume will go up, and I think their percentage will go up.
Well, the volume, if you want to talk about things that really are no different than last year, their volume is still very low.
And they're doing very well getting the free throw line. But again, this is the personality of your players. Like, you have Anthony Davis draws a lot of fouls. LeBron James, even at this age, can still get himself to the line. Austin Reaves seems to have solved a bit of the riddle of what was keeping him off of the free throw line last year, and things like that. And so, you have a strength in this team of getting to the free throw line, and that doesn't change. And I don't think Redick wants it to change just because, you have a goal to shoot more free throws. It's just
shoot more 3-pointers.
I'm sorry. Yes. Thank you. Shoot more 3-pointers. I mean, the Lakers are 4th in the league right now in free throws per game. And so I think, it is that 3-0 start, especially, I think got people off to an idea that like things were going to be like not only just radically better, but also radically different. And I think it's more a question of how do you take what's there and just stretch out the good stuff a little bit more, knock out some of the negative a little bit more so you get something better in total. But you can't take the same players and turn them around 180 degrees and have them play in completely different ways unless they were being completely mismanaged before. And I don't think that was the case.
I agree with you that the personality of this team at the end of the day is going to be more paint bound, more getting to the rim. But at the same time, you want to make sure that there's more variance, if for no other reason than not to overload AD, because their prowess in the paint, a lot of that is Anthony Davis. Their prowess at the line, a lot of that is Anthony Davis. Like but not all of it. Not all of it. They've got a lot of players who are very effective in the paint. No, I know that, but it still is. It still is very indicative in a lot of ways of the stuff Anthony Davis is specifically doing. And again, I'm not looking to get away from any of it. I'm just saying I think the variance will, in certain ways, take some of that burden off AD over the course of an 82-game season. That's all. I'm not looking for them to reinvent entirely what they do offensively. I'm just looking for a little more variance, and also just to make the math a little bit easier for them as they compete with some of these other teams. When you mention the idea, though, of like what is different in terms of, for example, DAngelo Russell getting moved to the bench a couple games ago, Cam Reddish being put into the starting lineup, which was controversial last year in a lot of respects. One difference I see in this, first of all, is I get a sense, and I do not know this, and I haven't even necessarily heard it reported, but just in the way Redick has talked about communication with DAngelo Russell over the course of the offseason, D'Lo seemingly not all that shocked that the move came, and also seeming not to be, at least so far, treating it like a straight up demotion. And I feel like you can tell DAngelo Russell, regardless of the fact that he clearly was, he was not shooting well, and also he was clearly having a difficult time finding exactly what his role was within the starting five. You can look at D'Lo in the face, honestly, and just say, look, man, the bench needs some pop. We have none. Yeah. This isn't necessarily about you. It's about them. We need you to take one for the team. And even acknowledging D'Lo's slow start, it doesn't change the fact that that is true. And it doesn't change the fact that that was something that plagued the Lakers last year once they created that starting five that was offensively explosive. As far as Reddish, though, also going to the starting unit now, I think it is contextually different because JJ Redick opened the season doing what the players clearly wanted, B, what had worked last year, and not seemingly like Darvin had, looking to try anything but the thing that had worked. And also, too, you just, after a while, you start seeing, and this is a carryover from last season, the need for balance. Like the starting and bench units were too unbalanced. Like the starting unit was too unbalanced towards offense. The second unit was too unbalanced. You could argue towards defense. In reality, I'd say
I think it turned out to be unbalanced towards defense because, again, Christie was providing, genuinely negative value, and Vincent has been. I am guarantee you that Vincent is worse offensively than expected. That Christie is worse offensively than expected, and that even Connect is less is sure. He's not hitting shots. I think he will. And I think,
but it still though was a group that from the outset did not profile to score
profile
much.
was going to be a massive scoring bench, but it also didn't. But I do not believe that they were thinking that this was going to be a bench that produced, not just 7 points a game, but like 7 shots a game. So I think that matters. And so like the roster hasn't performed in the way that people were expecting. Even the difference between last year, Reaves was playing worse than Russell was when Russell was moved to the bench. D'Lo's net rating when he was moved to the bench was third best among rotation players. I didn't fourth if you count Reddish in the 2 games he had started to play. I wasn't doing that. Of the guys who had been in the rotation when D'Lo was moved to the bench, he had the third highest net rating, and that's because his work as a point guard, distributing the ball, setting up teammates and all that kind of stuff was actually very good. He just was missing tons of shots. Reaves was worse when he was moved to the bench last year at that point. And so I think while D'Lo isn't going to take that as just taking one, he's going to see it as a demotion because all players in this situation see it as a demotion. He knows he's still on. I mean, like every time I see one of these trade rumors, and we'll maybe touch on this today, and we'll get into it maybe more tomorrow. Of like, the Lakers are making it aware, making it clear that DAngelo Russell is available. I mean, it's like,
sure.
Yes. I mean,
although we'll save it for more tomorrow. I would just say if you are a Laker fan or someone covering this team, whatever, and you see DAngelo Russell, that move to the bench as the precursor to the inevitable trade that not only everybody expected, but also everybody thought. There was a lot of talk about how D'Lo would first get moved to the bench because that would make it easier for them to move forward as they would post D'Lo, and it becomes easier to replace a guy off the bench. Slow down. That's all. We'll explain more later, but I think if anything, might be the opposite. We'll see.
It's a bit like just the notion of like he knows what's going on here, and there is nothing the Lakers can tell him. Redick might be able to because Redick ultimately is in charge of trading him. But Redick can say, "Here's what we need you to do to try to help the team win." And I think D'Lo can sort of look at this and be like, if people think I can be a really good sixth man, it's not that you can't find things that are like, okay, kind of valuable for both sides here. But it's interesting to me that D'Lo has something like 4 assists in 2 games since going to the bench. And as you noted, it's in part because he is playing with at least 2 bench guys or something at those moments, and they don't score. So it's hard to get assists. But it is a completely different role that he's playing, which is, I guess, the idea.
I just think they need, considering the guys that you would be giving the ball up to, I think they actually need D'Lo to look to score more than they need to assist.
Of course, I agree with you. And I get why.
Sure. I'm just commenting. I feel like it actually is just, let's cut out the middleman, go score, D'Lo.
It's one of these things that I don't know. Everyone knows I'm Cam Reddish skeptical, but I ultimately don't know what this looks like in 15 games. But what I think we can quit here and pick it up tomorrow. But what I think is really going to be fun to watch, assuming the Lakers can keep winning enough games to make this a competitive season, is just seeing where those things, like where the differences kind of round out and to what degree. Is it really something radically different, or are we just turning knobs here in ways that hopefully result in 3 or 4 more wins than they got last year out of the same roster? I think that ultimately, to me, is going to be the direction it goes, but we'll see. Go sign up for the newsletter, LockedOnDaily.com. Click on Locked On Lakers, get the show delivered to you every day. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 26,000 fans. We'll see everyone tomorrow.